Is this too much? Am I doing too much? ¿Conoces ese sentimiento de que puedes entender todo, pero todavía no puedes responder rápidamente? Empiezas a expresar un pensamiento, pero te faltan las palabras clave. Y luego, años después, tienes la sensación que ya, mi español está suficientemente bueno, pero todavía no puedes expresarte de forma natural. Hola, mi nombre es Eli. Soy alemana viviendo en Canadá y llevo 7 años aprendiendo el español. Y la mayor parte de ese tiempo estaba atrapada en este nivel. And since so far I've been talking about my own experiences of acquiring language, this is what I'm gonna do. Todo empezó en el año 2019. I was studying international relations in the Netherlands, and as part of my degree, I had to choose a language minor. And I already knew French at an intermediate level, but I wanted to use this opportunity to start learning a whole new language. Now, I could have chosen everything from Dutch to Italian to Russian and Chinese, but I felt that Spanish at that point was more useful to me. And let's be honest, figured Spanish was easier to pass than Chinese. So I started from scratch in my second semester of my bachelor's degree. We were being put through the ringer, learning Spanish in 1 year and 2 months from 0 to B2. That was a struggle. And I remember by the end of the language course, we were all struggling with the subjuntivo. But anyway, so I graduated with a B2 in Spanish. And technically that was a really good level. Like with that I could go and study in Spain if I wanted to, or find a job maybe. But you know, I only used Spanish here and there, like while traveling to Spain. I could order food. And I mean, let's be real, like B2 is a good level to have. But as with every language, if you don't use it, you lose it. And I have lost it multiple times, actually, in this language learning journey, which is why it took me 7 years to get here. So the thing is, my sentences in Spanish were functional, but I feel like it wasn't really going in depth. I was still finding myself in front of this barrier where I could not express myself. It was very stop and go. Anyway, fast forward a few years. This was 2023. I, at that point, had done my master's. I graduated and I went to Washington, D.C. for an internship at a development institution that focused on Latin America. And let me tell you, the interview, I kind of bombed it. I'm not gonna lie. It was one of those typical competency-based interviews. And one of the questions was in Spanish. Like, I expected that they were gonna ask me something in Spanish, and I did prepare for it, but I realized as I was trying to build my answer, oh my God, roadblock after roadblock. Like, it was really bad. I don't know what possessed them of hiring me. I'm glad they did. It was a great experience. It was a challenge I overcame. You got this amazing opportunity.
Battery low.
Ugh. If you want to keep getting opportunities like that, you're gonna have to improve your Spanish if this is the field you want to work in. So in a sense, this was kind of a kick in the butt for me to really relearn Spanish. My last Spanish class was at that point 3 years ago. In 3 years, oof, you can really forget a lot. So my office that I was working in was fully Spanish speaking. It was amazing. I had daily exposure. My vocabulary grew a lot. I gained a lot of technical vocabulary that was important for the role. And I also felt my comprehension getting a lot better. I could understand everything in the work meetings, all the complicated texts that I had to read and write, and it was all, you know, the writing and reading and listening part of things were really easy, but I still couldn't articulate complex thoughts. It was so frustrating. And that is a classic plateau where you understand everything, but you're just not truly fluent yet. During later internships, and don't ask me how many I did, I used more French than Spanish. And so Spanish kind of went on the back burner. We all know when you work full time, it's super hard to take time out of your schedule to also study another language. So yeah, I wasn't moving forward. My first real crack in the plateau came 1 year later, 2024. I was living in New York at the time, doing another internship. let's not talk about it. And at that point in my life, I was kind of trying to figure out where to go next. I was applying to all kinds of jobs and waiting to hear back, and I decided to spend the winter in Colombia. I understood very well that I was going to have to be able to communicate in Spanish if I wanted to spend time there. And that wasn't even my first time in Latin America. After my first semester of learning Spanish, I spent a couple of days traveling through Argentina and Uruguay on my way to Brazil. And A2 Spanish at the time, yo no entendí ni los argentinos ni los uruguayos. I found it really hard to communicate when I was there. I mean, I had an amazing time. I was at the beach every day. The hostel was right at the beach. And I really did improve my Spanish speaking abilities, but I had a long way to go. And I really noticed that when I went to Medellin, I enrolled in a language school. After not really using Spanish at all for the past maybe year or so, to the surprise of absolutely nobody, I had to relearn a lot of the B-level grammar. Pretérito perfecto, el imperfecto, subjuntivo. And unfortunately, yeah, I even struggled with the condicional. Amor. El condicional se utiliza en el nivel A2. If you're freaking out right now and thinking, is it actually possible to lose a whole language within 1 year? You absolutely can. Yeah. But the good news is you can relearn it to a high level very quickly. So at that language school in Medellin, I spent really only a few weeks, 2 or 3, drilling grammar, honing the basics. And so after a few short weeks of really focusing, I did get back, I would say, to the level B2, even though the presente del subjuntivo sigue siendo difícil. At least at that point, I was actually confident using all the grammar that you're supposed to be using at that level. So technically, I was back to where I started after I graduated, but at this point, I had momentum. So the way forward now was more exposure, more immersion. So when I left Colombia, like a month or 2 later, I wasn't on a C level yet, and I'm not technically now. Like I haven't taken the exam yet. I will do that hopefully this year. But I was speaking very fluently, and that is completely thanks to living in an environment where you need to speak Spanish. Colombia is one of the most beautiful countries I have ever been to. The amount of butterflies and birds and plants and flowers and the coffee, everything. Fast forward now a couple of months, and I was back in Germany, and I was struggling really hard to find a job. If you have worked in the international development sector before, you will know that since the shutdown of USAID, a lot of people have been laid off. The job market has been flooded with a lot of mid-level, senior-level talent that is now applying to the same entry-level jobs that former interns and recent graduates are also applying to. Long story short, there is no way that any of us will ever find a job again. I'm exaggerating right now, but it is really bad. And I was still trying really hard to get a foot in the door and to just gain more work experience, because also if you have under a certain amount of years of work experience, you're just forever damned in the cycle where you will not find a job if you don't already have experience. That is the reality for a lot of people right now, not just me. So I'm just bringing it up to explain why I've been doing so many internships, because it really felt like there are no other jobs to be found. And it is, in a way, selling yourself short, because if you've already done internships before, clearly ready to enter the job market, did have a job lined up, unfortunately that fell through, you gotta continue somehow. So I found an internship, this time in Mexico, in Aguascalientes. And I had my first, it wasn't fully Spanish, but it was a bilingual Spanish-English job interview. So there were definitely way more questions in Spanish compared to the internship interview I had a few years back for Washington, D.C. But I did feel ready now to actually succeed. And still, It was really difficult for me not to use English words when explaining certain concept in Spanish. It was another painful reminder that you're just not there yet. My level of Spanish just wasn't there yet. Regardless, I got the internship and I was really excited because for me, more than anything else, the fact that I was going to be able to improve my Spanish and maybe reach a fluency where I could take the C-level exam, that was very exciting for me. And I'm trying really hard to improve the languages that I speak because I'm trying to explain a metaphor to you that I have in my head. For me, the language that I'm learning, I see it as like the surface of a body of water. And so the language that I'm learning, fluency is the surface. I am under the water, scratching on the surface, trying to get above the water. So under the water is struggle, frustration, not being able to express yourself well, and trying really hard to get to a point where you can work in the language, in your target language, because that's the reason I'm learning these languages. I want to be able to find work in a country where the language is spoken. Not feeling good enough. And above the surface is bliss, knowledge, frolic, and this feeling of accomplishment. So that is what I'm chasing. I moved to Aguascalientes in Mexico, and from the moment I got there, I felt at the right place. Previously, I had only really known Ciudad de Mexico, and if you've been to Mexico City before, you know that you will hear a lot of English wherever you go, and a lot of people will also directly speak to you in English when you're there, because you could say tourism has maybe gotten out of hand a bit over the last couple of years since the pandemic, which also came with gentrification of certain areas where now when you go there, sometimes all you hear is English. But I don't want to talk about Ciudad de Mexico today. I want to talk about Aguascalientes. Once I moved, it was perfect. I needed Spanish everywhere. You don't really come across people that often that speak English. Actually, you'll probably more likely come across people that speak Japanese due to Nissan having a big plant just outside of Aguascalientes, which is fascinating for me. A big Japanese community in the middle of Mexico, for me, is super interesting. I love seeing how cultures mix like that. Anyway, every day, all day, at work, social interactions, at the cafe, at Pilates, at the gym, I was speaking Spanish all day. It was perfect. And after a few months, I noticed that something had changed. I was no longer translating the sentences in my head before speaking them out loud, but I was able to actually directly start speaking in Spanish, which felt amazing. And the first time I really noticed it was when a friend came to visit me from Germany. She came and stayed with me for a little bit and we explored the city together. So we went to one of the hot springs, the Aguas Calientes. Get it? There are unfortunately only 2 left. There used to be more. We did a tour of the city, visited one of the vineyards that are outside of Aguascalientes, and it was in that moment that I realized I managed to break through the surface. I basically interpreted the entire tour. At that point, I had been in Mexico, I would say for 6 months, I think. You know, my lifestyle is quite unique. I'm fully aware that you cannot just jet off to Colombia or Mexico for several months to learn a language, especially if you have to work full time. In a way, my times of being unemployed that I spent traveling, while it was really frustrating for me to not find work despite my qualifications, I would not have been able to take the time to actually work on improving my languages if it wasn't for that. Learning a language requires resources. I'm aware of that. The courses I've been able to take, all that obviously costs money. But I do think there are ways to immerse yourself in the language if you're not able to travel. There's probably language cafes or language exchange events in your city, and they're actually a lot of fun. There will also very likely be a Spanish-speaking community somewhere in your city that you can try and get in contact with. All you need is to find someone who's willing to speak to you in Spanish, or maybe you can do a tandem. You teach them your language and they teach you Spanish. So there's ways to improve your Spanish fluency without having to travel. I really want to stress you need to expose yourself to Spanish as much as possible. Really, your YouTube videos that you watch, your Netflix movies you watch at night, the podcasts you listen to need to be in Spanish, because passive learning actually also helps a lot. It helped me a lot. And I want to give you some recommendations. If you're specifically interested in what's going on in Mexico, I want to recommend to you Ruido Social on YouTube. Really check it out. Very good content about social issues in Mexico right now. And then also from NPR Radio, Radio Ambulante is a really good podcast that I love listening to, where you'll also be exposed to different accents of Spanish, actually. You'll have some podcasts that are telling stories from Argentina, and some from Colombia, some from Venezuela. So you'll hear different accents of Spanish. And then lastly, Italki is something that I discovered for myself this year. I started taking classes a few months ago because I'm preparing right now for the Dele C1 exam. I started taking classes with a examiner actually on Italki. That is a really good opportunity to learn Spanish from home. Now, that is, of course, if you're willing to invest some money into that. Where I'm now, am no longer blocked by hesitation or vocabulary blocks. Like I just, if I can't find the word, I guess I'll say it in English or whatever. It doesn't matter. I just start speaking fluently. I'm also at a point in my life, I've noticed that where I naturally seek out Spanish speakers. A lot of my friends here are Mexican or Colombian. So while I'm living in Canada right now and I am trying to improve my French right now, I'm not losing my Spanish because at home I speak Spanish with my roommates. So yeah, that is my entire 7-year journey of learning Spanish. It takes time, especially if you have work, if you are trying to chase a career, it takes time. And that's okay. Quiero que tú sepas que hacer un monólogo es más fácil de hablar con otra persona. La otra persona puede tener un acento que no conoces o puede hablar más rápido o que sea. Sí estoy hablando con mucha fluidez en este momento porque tengo tiempo de pensar qué es que quiero decir. And you don't have that kind of time when you speak to people in real life. Yo sigo haciendo muchos errores y muchas veces hago los mismos errores que siempre. Por ejemplo, estoy usando las falsas formas del pasado, estoy usando el falso género porque, por ejemplo, en alemán no son los mismos géneros. Por ejemplo, la mesa en español es femenino, en alemán es masculino. Entonces sí, I struggle with that as well. Pero al final, lo que es importante es que no te compares con los demás. Always compare yourself to who you were before so that you can actually see the progress you've made, because that is a very satisfying feeling. And with that, I'll leave you. I've done enough. Thank you for watching. Suscríbete y hasta la próxima. Bye!